Hello and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I am Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. I am the founder and the spiritual director. Now, as you are sitting there joining us, you may have questions, any number of questions, such as, who am I? How did I get here? Spiritually integrated arts means what exactly? What is a teaching center? Well, what is Centers for Spiritual Living? What is that? What does that even mean? Or New Thought, or religious science, or science of mind and spirit? You may have any number of questions about this specific community, about the parent organization, CSL, our philosophy, our teaching, our liberation theology. Any number of questions. Feel free to send an email. We look forward to connecting more and building our virtual community, our global community. And if you haven't connected yet on social media, feel free to do so. This is your invitation now. Also, did you know that all of our Sunday messages are archived on our YouTube channel? You can watch it anytime. Now, questions about anything, such as becoming a member. What does that mean? What does membership entail? And if you live somewhere far and already belong to a spiritual community, can you be a member of more than one? The simple answer is yes, you can. Just like you can shop at more than one grocery store, you can attend or be a member of more than one gym. We are building beloved community. So you can do both. You can be a member of both. You can be involved with both. That's what being in spiritual community means. So we welcome you. We invite you. We are so appreciative that you have found this community and that you have joined us today. We bless you. We love you. We welcome you. Live long and prosper. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of our Sunday message. Love you. Connect with you soon. Blessings. Namaste and greetings. As we continue our conversation about this idea of radical interconnection. Today we are talking about mindful living, the ripples, which are the art of mindful living. The science of mind teaches that our thoughts, which I refer to as our mental equivalents, all four pillars, create our reality. They create our lived experiences, both individually and collectively, and these cannot be separated. Breathe that in. Both individually and collectively. Now, often we give our attention to certain things or select things, and we make those things real. For example, if I believe that Tracy said something, or rather, I believe that what she said meant this, then I make that thing real, even though what she said and my interpretation may not in fact be accurate. We see a great many things and we focus our attention on them and thereby make these things real to us. And because we make them real to us, we reinforce the idea, we reinforce the consciousness, we reinforce the experience in our own lives and in the world. Think about the number of people who have made transgender, specifically women, but transgender people the enemy. And they have made this imagined enemy the boogeyman of. And as a result of that, it is reinforcing this idea in their consciousness, which is then showing up as policies and laws and procedures that are discriminatory and harmful and life-threatening. We cannot separate. Once the pebble hits the water, there will be ripples. So our invitation is, especially referencing this idea of mind, our mentality, because in psychology, we call this thing, or it is called biased attention, or a type of confirmation bias, where we selectively focus on certain information. But it's certain information, as long as it confirms what we have already determined is important to us. This is one reason why many people will get into a cult of politics, a cult of religion, a cult of personality. And they are so focused on their bias that they only get information. Think about it this way. We know that social media, the internet, etc., is based upon certain algorithms. And depending on what we click on, the algorithm is like, oh, they want to have more of this. And the algorithm begins to send, we didn't select it. Our bias, the algorithm, selects it for us and gives us more of what it believes we want more of. Our mental gymnastics, our psychology, our mental equivalence does the same thing. Breathe. Because when we get this information, and it confirms our confirmation bias, we tend to ignore, we tend to dismiss all this other stuff because we are so focused on this. But if we're going to Science of Mind and Spirit 4.0, we need to be open and available, open at the top and the bottom, to all information so that we can determine and assess, okay, that is actually spiritual bypass. But the reason I know that is because I am looking at the entirety of the consciousness, the experience, the condition, the words, the emotions, the everything to be able to identify. The only reason I can tell the difference between an apple and an orange is because I have the information to be able to discern But if I didn't have that information, I'd have no idea. For example, last night or the night before, I was watching this thing on, I believe, Netflix called You're Not Supposed to, I think it's called You're Not Supposed to Ask That. And it's asking a variety of people a variety of questions that normally we would say, you don't ask someone that. And the particular episode I was watching was with people who had varying degrees of blindness. And one of the questions was, so being blind, well, like, what do you see? Do you see absolute blackness or darkness, or what do you see? And one of the gentlemen said, because I've never seen, when you say darkness, I've never seen light to be able to discern, well, what's the opposite of light? Dark. I don't know. When you say blackness, well, I've never seen any other colors, so I don't even know what black or blackness, I don't know what that is. I have no concept in my consciousness because I have no reference point for it. If we're going to discern between whatever, to identify our confirmation biases and other biases, etc., we have to have a reference point to be able to move through in order to live more effectively. Because all of this influences how we show up, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to others, how we relate to the world, how we relate to God. So let's dive in and follow the ripples wherever they may go. Now, confirmation bias may be a term you're not familiar with. So here are some examples. Ignoring information that may change your belief. You said, what now? So referencing anything, the caste system, racism, sexism, homomisia, etc. If you have this belief, heaven, hell, anthropomorphic God, whatever that is, I believe this, and someone brings you information that makes you want to deconstruct or challenge this, you're like, oh, no, 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 no. So you're going to ignore all other possibilities of information because, no, I believe this and I'm not going to, no, Santa Claus is real. Don't know. Only remembering specific details as long as they uphold whatever your beliefs are. Are you willing to question and ask, even within this teaching? If I were to say, sit with the idea, with the question of, what if what we teach about spiritual mind treatment, what if it's not 100% what we teach it to be? What if? Are you willing? Now, note how that makes you feel. Just the idea of a question, what if prayer does not work 100% of the time? What if? I'm simply saying, sit in the space of, well, what if? And then follow the ripples. Now, you may say, well, what if? Okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then you get here and you say, I now have information that proves to me or demonstrates further to me that my initial premise was in fact correct. Prayer does work. Based upon my definition of what prayer is, my definition of what it means for it to work. I, in fact, do. And then follow the different ripples. I ask the different questions. Because if we don't ask and we don't question, how do we really know that we are not simply fooling ourselves with some version of Pollyanna-ish, placebo-ish thinking versus effective liberation theology? Now, there are all kinds of cognitive biases and etc. And so I invite you to visit this website to read more, get some extra information about what that means, what it looks like, etc. But there are all kinds of biases that impact how we show up in the world. There's an amazing show called The Irrational, or just Irrational, where there's a professor who talks about, like, the actual, each episode of the show, some form of psychological something is introduced into the show. And a lot of this, gambler's fallacy, etc., has been introduced in the show. And it's very interesting to watch how it plays out in the story, because it's one thing to read it, it's a different thing to see it, because then it's, oh, I do that some, wow. Which, once again, the more we can identify any of our biases, the more effective we can address whatever we need to address via the bias, around the bias, etc. Ultimately, self-awareness. Science of Mind and Spirit is about greater self-awareness. The more self-aware we are, the more aware of the self that we are. The more I am aware of myself, who I am as a human being with a personality, emotions, likes, dislikes, etc., and I really go and follow that thread, it has no choice but to lead me to the capital S self. It has no choice but to, because once again, I am reminded there's only God. And the more I know me, the more I know it. Ultimately, that's what self-awareness is. Now, it can seem rather daunting to uncover the variety of hidden beliefs that we have, or the variety of biases that we have, because we are the sum total of everything that we have ever thought to this point, ever believed to this point, ever felt, and ever done to this point, plus all of the various influences around us, be it family, social media, politics, etc. And so, while we can't specifically change the outside world, right? I can't stop it from raining, per se. I can't change the outside world. I can't snap my fingers and change the political climate around the world or in the United States. We can change our internal perceptions and understandings. So change, not only is it possible, it's inevitable. Change is occurring anyway. And we're actually going to talk more about that. I believe it's next month. So change is happening. But when we are self-aware, we are governing more of what that change is changing in certain areas. And as Dr. Holmes reminds us, we exist in limitless opportunities, which are forever seeking expression through us, in us, and as us. Destroy the thought that would place limitation or bondage upon any situation or any condition. Talk to yourself, not to the world. There is no one to talk to but yourself, for all experience takes place within. Conditions are the reflections of our meditations and nothing else. There is but one mind. That mind is our mind now. It never thinks confusion, knows what it wishes and how to accomplish what it desires. It is what it desires. Now, before we go on, I want to just throw out there and sort of point out that there is no one to talk to but yourself. No, talk to each other. We are a social expression of God. God made itself, shows itself, lives itself as the trillions of people on this planet, the trillions of apples and trees and rocks, and talk to one another. Because that is the only way that we are demonstrating our radical interconnection. If I just meditate to myself, talk to myself, pray to myself, all about me, rugged individualism is not going to create peace on earth, goodwill to all. So I understand what he's saying. It sort of references the idea when Jesus says, Like, don't go out into the street screaming and praying aloud and banging cymbals and trumpets. Look at me, I am praying, and look at me, how holy. He said, look, chill with that. Go into the quiet place within your home, go into the closet, close the door, and be present with. So, yes, there's that element of, I don't need to performative relationship, performative sacred activism, performative allyship. No, be about it. But the only way I can actually be about it is if I'm being about it. So it's both and. There is that which is to be done, self work, self awareness. My degree of self awareness gives me greater interconnection, awareness of with you and them and all. So it's both and. So we go on. In the grand scheme of what we are being invited to with self awareness and mindfulness is, are we being mindful or are we too mindful? And if we are mindful, what is our mind full of? What are the thoughts that we are full of? What are the beliefs we are full of? How full of ourselves are we? So full of my egoic self and the perceptions that others have of me. And I'm concerned with what they think of me. And I'm concerned with this. And I am so full of myself that I have no room to truly be self aware. But when I am mindful, then I am able to focus my attention wherever it needs to be at any given moment, and I have divine stewardship and dominion over, rather than, right? Like, have you ever seen a cat or a dog looking at, like, there's a fly buzzing around and it's like, and its whole attention is like, okay, and that's us oftentimes. We're doing that with the news and social media and wait a minute, and Instagram and wait a minute, wait, TikTok, what's on? Oh, and look at YouTube and well, okay, what's going on? Facebook and oh, look, Twitter and what's going? And we are so preoccupied and so full of that we have no space to truly be full of the infinite that God is. It's like we have crowded, even though we truly can't, but we have crowded our mind with so much busyness that we can't be about the business of our own divinity. So mindfulness is the practice of being aware of this current moment right here and right now. No judgment, no criticism, just be present. Mindfulness involves your ability to focus on whatever you need to focus on, your surroundings, focus on your body, focus on your breath, focus on your relationships, focus on whatever you need to focus on, and accept exactly as it is, exactly as they are, exactly as you are. Be present. If looking at a pen, look at a pen. Don't look at a pen daydreaming about drinking lemonade because you're not really why are you holding this and focusing on it then? Right? Like, how many, I'm not sure what year it was, but how many of us remember the year when being on your cell phone while driving was like, oh, no. Why? If you're going to drive, drive. If you need to be on the phone, pull over. Why though? Why is that? Why? Because we understood that the moment you split your attention and you become so focused on the phone, you are more dangerous on the road. Mindfulness is be present. Do what you are doing fully. Be present right here and right now. If having a conversation, have a conversation. If driving, You can talk in the car, but you are focused on the driving. It's not like you take your hands off the wheels and you are so engaged in the conversation that no, 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 no. But this thing, the phone, we become full of attention to whatever's going on the phone. And we lose attention to the activity of driving. Now, not only is it safer in such, being mindful regarding driving, but mindfulness, it has been determined, studied, researched that mindfulness, the practice of it, also gives us a variety, a vast range of other benefits. Reduces our stress and anxiety. It improves our overall focus and concentration. We have greater ability to regulate our emotions. It enhances our self-awareness, enhances our creativity. It increases our ability to be resilient in challenging and difficult situations, and potentially even have more or greater life-affirming impact on our physical health, our emotional health, etc., as it relates to emotional pain, physical pain, trauma, etc. Mindfulness promotes greater relaxation, more effective and restful sleeping. It boosts our energy and our immune system and more. So not only is mindfulness a great spiritual practice, but it is a great practice for our overall health and well-being. And so if I ask, well, what kinds of practices are mindful practices? There's a huge variety, and this is just a tiny bit. But we have mindfulness in everyday life. If you're washing your hands, wash your hands. If you're cutting the vegetables, cut the vegetables. If you're cooking, cook. Pausing and breathing mindfully, taking 3 focused breaths, right? Just in the moment, right? Like there's a great variety of ways that we can bring more practices of mindfulness to our regular everyday living instead of being on the go of our default setting so often, so much, being full of the activities of to-do list and check and got to check the calendar, make sure the calendar on the website is the same as the calendar on the phone and the same as the calendar on the wall, because one thing that, and separate, pause, breathe, and then act. Now, you may or may not know this, but when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. marched downtown in Chicago against the Vietnam War, which happened, on my birthday, well, 1 year, I was 1 year old at this time, a few months after he and Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh had met. So they met, and then a month later, Dr. King marches, right, in the protests, okay? So he did so under the banner, which in English and in Vietnamese, it read, "Men are not our enemies, and if we kill men, then whom shall we live with?" The two of them shared the insight that it is not the other people who are the enemies, but instead the enemies are such things as anger, resentment, hatred, fear, discrimination. It was by concentrating on this insight, being mindful of this insight and this realization, that Thich Nhat Hanh and Sister Chan Khong and their young social workers in Vietnam were able to stay neutral and not take sides during the war, right? Because it's easy to take sides. Democrats and Republicans, blacks and whites, men and women, gays and straights. It's easy to take sides and then vilify whoever is on the other side. But when we understand what is causing that separation, and we understand the divine radical interconnection, then the thing that seems to separate us need not separate us and actually can unify us. This idea of neutrality, because there are times when we are not to be neutral. Let's be clear, right? If you see an abuse happening or you're aware of it, you don't simply say, well, I choose to be neutral. And no, there are times to choose a side. As Elie Wiesel says, when you see an oppression happening and you don't choose, then technically, and Bishop Desmond Tutu said the same thing. If you do not choose when you see this happen, what you have chosen is the side of the oppressor. Your silence has chosen. Your inactivity has chosen. But this idea of neutrality means we are able to see through the illusion of the things that separate us. We see through the division and understand that hate and fear is actually what's driving the behavior. The path of not hating the enemy is a profoundly spiritual practice. Dr. King once said that if we have enough spirituality and ethics, we will be able to replace hate with love. And so, as meditators, we train in this way of seeing so that we can confront injustice without hating. We need a spiritual dimension in our lives. Thich Nhat Hanh says we shouldn't all, Thich Nhat Hanh or Tay says we shouldn't all, that's a typo, spirituality to be exclusively claimed by one particular side. Right? What the world most needs right now is a God of compassion. We need to be connected to and aware of a God of non-discrimination, a God of tolerance, a God of love. Love allows us to go even further and to see hatred and anger and fear and discrimination not so much as enemies, but as energies. And these energies are inside all of us. And these energies that are inside all of us can be embraced and transformed. So, are we mindful enough, self-aware enough to do this transformative work? Because it's easier to be angry, to not forgive, to resist. It's easier, right? Because it's already what you're feeling. But the moment it's like, I'm angry, I'm afraid, I'm whatever this is, and I should embrace this. I'm invited to embrace this. I'm invited to be mindful. I'm invited to transcend. I'm invited to transform. There's work to be done. And in this work, it also then means this person who calls me the N-word, or that person who uses the F slur, and all of the other various ways that we insult these people. The person is not the enemy. The person is expressing a certain energy, and the energy is driving the behavior. The energy is driving the words. The energy is driving what is mine to do to transcend and transform the energy. And granted, it may not be directly with, come here, let me embrace you, Mr. Klansman, so that it may not be that. But what it is saying that when this comes at me, the venom of you, when that comes at me, if I don't do something with it, then it lands and it sticks. And I may not be aware of it, but it's present. My body, my aura receives the energy. Even if I dismiss, I may not say anything directly to them. I may not. But I've received it because I heard it. I see the face and the fingers and I see it. So I have received it. What am I doing with that having received it? Because if I give it back, well, then I am now infected with that same energy, that same dis-ease and discord and disharmony. And that's never going to heal the world. So what is mine to do? How do I take what this is, transcend it and transform it first in my own being, so that it then changes how I interact in the world? But if I allow the biases of whatever, the bias of, well, someone who refers to me that way, they're just an idiot. And then I'm going to confirmation bias, etc. I'm looking for more reasons they're an idiot, they're stupid, they're uneducated, they're whatever that is. And that may not be the facts. It may not be the facts. My biases may not be the facts, and it certainly isn't the truth. Nikki Giovanni reminds us, if you do not understand yourself, then you do not understand anybody else. Once again, self-awareness. The more self-aware we are, the more aware we are of others, and the more it changes how we interact with others, because it changes how we interact with ourselves. So self-awareness is, how aware am I of my biases, including my beliefs, my preferences, etc.? Some are non-life affirming and some may be life affirming. If I have a preference for I'm drawing a blank. I have a preference for Marvel films versus DC films. We'll just say that. That's my preference. Okay, cool. I'm not saying that, oh, DC is horrible. It's my preference. I prefer movies like this. I prefer these kinds of characters. Why? Because of how it makes me feel. I enjoy. It brings me pleasure and entertainment, and cool. There's nothing wrong with it. It's life affirming. It's not hurting anything, hurting anyone, including myself. But the moment I now have a preference, and my preference says that one it's horrible, it's lousy, it's stupid, it's okay, based on what? Now, granted, the quality, they had 500 million, they had 50 million. There may be certain things referencing quality. Okay, I got you. But if I'm judging it in a way that is tearing down and creating separation, because the moment Tracy comes to me and says, oh, Ray, I just saw this really good movie, DC and Superman. And I'm like, oh, that's stupid. You're stupid. Why would you ever? It's non-life affirming, because my preferences have become a prejudice, have become, but I'm not going to know that if I'm not self-aware enough to know it. So our invitation is, how are we looking at the world? Through what lens are we looking at the world? Through what lens are we looking at ourselves, our relationships? Through what lens are we looking at any number of things? Because when we talk about a world that works for all, we're invited to really mindfully discern and ask very key questions. A world that works for all. What does that mean? Who is doing the determining of what works? And when we say that it works, what does that mean? It works. And how can the 8 trillion people on the planet come together in this agreement? Like, there's got to be a tipping point. It doesn't have to be every single person, but there's got to be a tipping point that now changes the way we do things. Are we having these conversations? Are we asking these of ourselves so that we have greater clarity? Do I sit down and ask myself, what does it mean for me? If someone asks me, Jen asks me, Irina asks me, what does a world that works for all mean? Tracy asks me, who's doing the determining? Are you deciding what works for everybody? Are they deciding? Who's deciding? If I'm not having these questions and asking these questions, for myself, then I'm not looking for the answer. And if I'm not looking for the answer, then why am I saying these beautiful platitudes of a world that works for all, a world that works for everyone? Ray, what does that mean? It means the world works for everyone. Okay, so when you say everyone, who is that? Everyone. Okay, so when you say it works, what does that mean? It works. Okay, you're using the words to answer. Can you explain? Is it not self-explanatory? A world, the earth, it works for all. It's self-explanatory. No, right. This circular thinking, this circular way of being is carousel consciousness. It's sitting on the merry-go-round, going around and going around and going around and going around and going around, thinking you're actually getting somewhere, and you're not. So if we want to truly have radical interconnections, true oneness, all of these things, then we really need to start asking different questions, having a different degree of self-awareness. It's painful to face how we harm others. It's painful to face how we harm others. We do a lot of harm to one another on this planet, including other humans and the environment, nature, the animals. We do a great deal of harm to others, and it takes a while. It's a journey that happens because of our commitment to staying awake, to being mindful. We heal this when we do the work. When we come back to that space of interconnection, when we come back to that space of self-awareness, when we come back to that space of mindfulness, then we are doing the work. Then we are having deeper conversations. Then we are engaging in more empowered communication that leads to cooperation and collaboration. We're not just talking to ourselves. The Buddha said at one point that if we truly loved ourselves, we would never harm another. Because if we harm another, it is in some way diminishing who we are. It is taking away from rather than adding to our lives. If we truly loved ourselves, we would never harm another. So what is this saying? What is Sharon telling us? Because we don't love ourselves, that's why we harm others. If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. Are you compassionate toward yourself? Do you love yourself? Because in the grand scheme of this thing called life, we do a lot of hurt and harm because our self-hatred, self-loathing, whatever that is, shows up as hatred and loathing and animosity towards others. We express it as fear of the other. Homophobia, the fear of. Transphobia, the fear of. Islamophobia, the fear of. But underneath, there's anger, resentment, and hatred. And underneath, there's anger, resentment, and self-hatred. And so once again, if we are going to transform the world, heal the world, all these things, then we are invited to do the work of self. So what is the cure then? If we're going to talk about healing the world, curing, then what is the cure? In Sorrow Mountain, the journey of a Tibetan warrior nun, Rinpoche is quoted as saying, remember the words of the Buddha. In separateness lies the world's greatest misery. In compassion lies the world's true strength. So what's the cure? Compassion. What's the cure? True oneness. What's the cure? Knowing our divinity. What's the cure? Knowing who and what we are as the infinite expressing in, through, and as us, and that what is true of us is true of all. What's the cure? Embodying that and living that in a way where it shows up as all of our relationships. It shows up in all of the ways we express unity as community, belonging, nurturing, supporting. It shows up as all of that. That's the cure. So when we are confronted with revealing the truth that poverty is a lack of knowledge of God, if we had a complete realization of the allness of God and our oneness with and as God, then we would automatically express abundance. Poverty is expressed as, because let's think about it. Why does poverty exist? This planet has more than enough for every person on the planet right now. Because if we just think about how much food in the United States of America that we throw away on a daily basis, just what we throw away would feed every hungry person in every other part of this world. We throw away a lot more than some people ever. So when we really understand that poverty is a lack of knowledge of our oneness with and as that which God is, and we understand that, and we change it and transform it and transcend it, going back to oneness, then we understand there is more than enough. But Yoda wants us to remix this, so let's remix it. We are confronted with the revealing truth that all the world's ills are caused by, all the world's ills are caused by a lack of knowledge of God. And if we had a complete realization of and embodied this realization and practiced it, then the allness of good would manifest. And it would do this because our oneness with God, our oneness as God, would cause us to express peace, compassion, healthcare, belonging, and more in every area of life. So we must accept that our own belief is the starting point. We must convince ourselves that it is right that we should be happy and successful as long as we cause no harm to anyone, and then that we bring this same thing to others. So self-awareness of our mental equivalence, once again, how aware are we of the four pillars and how it is showing up individually and collectively? The person who practices spiritual self-reliance must believe in God as an ever available intelligent power. People with spiritual self-reliance have a deep conviction that they are attuned to an infinite intelligence and that they are one with the all-knowing spirit. Breathe. Do you know this? Are you aware? Are you attuned to an infinite intelligence? Are you attuned that that infinite intelligence is right where you are, what you are, and that all that you are is one with and as the all-knowing spirit? A knowledge of this truth is necessary if we desire to develop an understanding that will cause us to be life-affirming without aggressiveness, that will make us sure of ourselves without egotism, arrogance, that will make us strong in action without becoming intolerant. But first of all, there must be an awareness of the presence of God. Next, and equally necessary, is faith in the spiritual self. The faith to which we are referring is not a faith in an isolated self which struggles through life alone, but faith in an inner knowledge, spiritual self-reliance, comes only to those who have a deep awareness of the availability of the creative spirit through the medium of their spiritual self and their oneness with the presence of God. Once again, this whole idea of self-awareness brings us to this space of, but in referencing our spiritual awareness, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Whatever it is we are practicing, how are we practicing it? What is it that we are actually doing? Whether it's the concept of wax on or wax off, what are we practicing consistently? What are we disciplining ourselves through our mindfulness or our mindfulness, through our addiction to the busyness or our conviction to the oneness? What are we practicing? We know that there is a power far greater than we are. There is a love that casts out fear and a faith that overcomes all obstructions. We must permit ourselves through life-affirming or affirmative thinking to enter into this power and this love with complete confidence. If we can believe that the spirit within us, God, makes perfect and happy the way before us when we enter into conscious union with everything that lives and commune with the spirit in all people and all things, there then develops an intimate relationship to the presence and the power which controls everything, and we know we can trust it. Breathe. The Science of Mind and Spirit 4.0 offers us a way to train our minds, discipline our minds, like studying to play a musical instrument or to develop a certain skill set. The mind, once trained, will automatically have access to the skills. The martial arts student disciplines their body and mind to attain mastery. This is what Science of Mind and Spirit 4.0 offers. In the laboratory of life, the dojo of the world, we have tools and we have techniques that we can use to manifest such things as peace, health, belonging, and unity. Greater self-awareness and conscious development of life-affirming mental equivalence increase exponentially the transformative ripples of consciousness that envelop the planet and spark the evolutionary vision and manifestation of a world that works for all. We must do the work if this is truly the desired outcome. Breathe. If, once I say the affirmation, our declaration, if this aligns with you and you agree, I invite you to repeat it with me the second time. I am ever mindful of the ways my life force, my presence, and my impact ripple out into the world. Together. I am ever mindful of the ways my life force, my presence, and my impact ripple out into the world. And so it is. This week's journal questions or Thursday night study group questions. Where or when in my life do I allow my biases, prejudices, and preconceived notions to prevent me from seeing others as they are? What can I do to increase awareness and transmute them so they are less and less influential in my interactions? 2, where, when in my life do I allow compassion, forgiveness, and belonging to deepen my connections with others? 3, How do my hidden biases prevent me from treating others with loving kindness? What are some biases that I am aware of? 4, how can I increase my awareness of oneness, especially amid this paradox of separation? And lastly, what do I practice? What do I do daily that is developing my mastery of life? Breathe. As we enter into this space of absolute awareness that we refer to as prayer, knowing the isness and allness of God, present right where we are, right as we are, and that whatever it is that is true of it must be true of us. And so we mindfully bring our awareness to this truth. We embody this truth, and we live from and as this truth. And in so doing, we transform our individual lives, our relationships, and the world. As we heal and move into this space of loving compassion, of and for self, of and for others, of and for all, then we are moving deeper and greater into that space of what true radical interconnection is. And what it is, oneness. That even though we see many, the many are the one. Just as we reference the oneness we call humanity, that is one group, humanity. And in that one group, there is a vast number of what we call humans. So this concept of oneness, the oneness that God is, it's not a foreign concept. We understand it very well. And now we are invited to bring that awareness to ourselves and live from it, live as it, be it. And so we breathe and allow that truth to settle, to mindfully act, to mindfully think, to mindfully feel, to mindfully speak from that awareness, and thereby being a healing and transformative presence in the world. That's what is right here and right now. And so it is. And so it is. Namaste, blessings, much love and appreciation, everyone. See you sometime during the week if you're attending any of the functions we're doing during the week. And otherwise, I will see you right here next Sunday. Feel free to click like, subscribe, and share with someone you believe could benefit from what we do, what we practice, what we teach, and how we live. Love and appreciate you.